We're going to have a great show today. We have Dr. Denise Vidot with us from Miami, joining us from the other coast. And listen,
see the big U.
Yeah, I know, we love that. Honored and privileged to have you. And Denise, listen, if you've ever seen our green room, we always start off with a little bit of political talk, and we have a lot of political talk. Val Deming's friend has,
that's exciting news.
It is. And listen, we're entering that political season, and my statement would be that, listen, cannabis, of course, it's the green room, should be a green, nonpartisan issue.
Yeah.
Right.
Marijuana,
That's
absolutely.
That's always our point.
We actually had Representative Stubbe on last week, and
fantastic
show. But I think as far as our government going forward very quickly, that will not be happening, according to the legislature.
Well, it's interesting, Denise, because when Congressman Stubbe was in last week, he talked about the two easy things that he believed could be achieved in Congress right now. One being better veterans access, which we're all for, every single one of us. And the second thing that was interesting, that I'd love your comment on it as we go through the show. He thought it would be very easy to reschedule to 3, right? To reschedule, not deschedule, as you know, in the advocate community that we talk about as being the most important thing for us. Completely get it off Schedule 1 so you can do the research.
Hello, I second that motion.
Also, to completely decriminalize, right? So there's not an opportunity to once again be arresting people and discriminating and, prison industrial complex. Listen, the reason I wanted to invite you today, Denise, I want you to introduce yourself and what you're doing over at Miami. We're talking about cannabis use disorder today. And, I've done a deep dive over the past couple of weeks because I'm doing that presentation in Naples this week at the FMCCE. Got to get it right. And Ruta's presenting as well on Friday.
Tomorrow.
So we're going to be down in Naples. But cannabis use disorder is interesting, Denise. And I know because you're an epidemiological person and the research that you do, I wanted to bring you into the discussion about how people use cannabis, how they can abuse cannabis, what you've seen in your research. So I'm going to throw the floor over to you so that you can tell us what you've learned, how you've studied, a PhD who's actually done her research in cannabis. So yeah, it is. So go ahead, Denise, and introduce yourself and tell us what you're up to.
Well, first of all, good morning. That is such a great intro. I love the green room. So the fact that I'm in here is kind of surreal. So I'm just sitting here enjoying being in the green room for a few minutes. But yes, I am Dr. Denise Cristina Vidot. I am a cannabis epidemiologist at the University of Miami. My primary faculty appointment is at the School of Nursing and Health Studies, but I also have an appointment at the School of Medicine. I'm also an affiliate member of Sylvester Comprehensive Cancer Center. And the reason why I'm saying all of my affiliations is because, similar to the various hats that I wear, I think we can attribute that to this plant that we're obsessed with, right? At least I am. I'm pretty obsessed with studying it. And as you mentioned with the scheduling, that it's very difficult for us to study this. In fact, just yesterday I was on the call with our IRB office, really just trying to figure out how we can get studies moving forward. I collaborate a lot with Dr. Wiener down here. We all know and love Michelle Wiener, but the reason why we should start there with this conversation is because, similar to this idea of cannabis use disorder, I think the idea of cannabis is misunderstood. And my laboratory focuses on collecting evidence to actually translate into community-based interventions, policy, hopefully, if they're reading the evidence. The challenge is getting the evidence and what type of evidence we're allowed to collect, etc. So one of the things that my laboratory focuses on is that we take an epidemiologic approach. So most people are like, what's epidemiology? Of course, you guys probably know.
Explain exactly what that is, Denise, because I don't think really people know exactly how deep a dive that you take when you get your doctorate in what it is, that you do. So explain the evolution to that and how you really came about to get so interested in cannabis to take such a deep dive.
Yes, thank you. So epidemiology, to me, I always call it the basic science of public health. When you're thinking of the actual science and the methods and all of that in population health, that's epidemiology at the fundamental level. When you think of someone who's counting all the cases, counting and trying to figure out and connect what causes, what's associated with what, And usually when I speak to my students, the biggest thing I think of is the CDC, and it's easy now amid COVID, sadly to say, but to give that example, because we can say all those numbers that you hear, prevalence, estimates, incidents, that's what an epidemiologist does. And the way that I use that tool of epidemiology is to focus on cannabis. Cannabis is the exposure of interest in my research. And I focus on all these chronic disease outcomes and all these health outcomes that could be potentially associated with cannabis. And my hypothesis is it is possible all through the endocannabinoid system. And let me tell you, as a PhD student, doctoral student, trying to do research on cannabis and now almost 11 years ago, it was really rough. You think there's stigma now?
It's impossible even now.
Right. Can you imagine
Even
11
now,
years
I
ago?
can't even imagine 11 years ago.
You would have thought that I was trying to
Denise,
change the
years
world.
ago, you look like you'd be 11 years ago. It looks like you'd be about 12.
I know. I
or
was gonna
something
say
to
she
me,
looks like she'd
so.
be on a little tricycle at 11 years ago.
Hey,
But that's crazy. So you've been a pioneer throughout in the academic world, you know, to that extent. So I can only imagine the roadblocks that have been up there for you.
yeah, it's quite interesting. But now, luckily, I was going to say savvy, but I don't know if that's the correct word. I'm educated enough now with the endocannabinoid system. The biggest difference is, as a student, I was not aware of the system. We are not taught this. I received my PhD in epidemiology from a school of medicine. And even within the School of Medicine, never have I heard of this system. Never have I heard of cannabis in a positive way. In fact, it's usually marijuana, weed, cocaine. It's like the same alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs. Other drugs is marijuana, cocaine, heroin in the same category.
Well, that was the interesting thing that came up as I prepared. And Adam, I got to give props to our producer behind the camera there, but he, you know, assisted with putting together my presentation for this weekend. And we both had to do a pretty deep dive into cannabis use disorder. And it, of course, stems from substance use disorder in general, opiates and alcohol always being kind of the leaders of the band, you know, and cannabis slotted in there. But what I like to say, Denise, and it's interesting, I don't think we have an endo alcohol system or an endo opiate system, although there are endorphins and receptors and things like that. But as you know, we're literally hardwired for cannabis because of anandamide and 2-AG. And when I get into my PhD friends world, you guys give the lectures on those receptors and things like that. But what have you found in your research to the extent?
I wanted to ask you, what did you find in research? Because I was playing a little bit devil's advocate today. So I was looking at the anti-cannabis research just so that because we have to always have rebuttals for everything.
Well, in Colorado, just to bring it up,
yeah,
we were talking about that before coming on. No, they just, I don't know if you're following it, Denise, there's a huge thing going in Colorado, 15% THC cap on flower in rec and medical, and a big concentrate, reduction. And the reason is they have a pediatrician in Colorado who's a Democrat, interestingly enough, who's proposing it because of the proposed danger and damage in the developing brain population, 25 and under, of the concentrates, right? And you know, we have to, as medical professionals, be concerned about that. So just prepping, you know, Ruta for where we're going with it.
Just because what I was finding in what I was reading throughout last night and this morning was there seems to be increased results from various studies and straight across country to country, in not only state to state, but increased psychosis. And I think that was the major crux of most of the studies were showing there was, with high THC levels and higher use of cannabis, that increased psychosis was occurring, in paranoia and job loss and isolation of some people. And those were steady outcomes that seemed to cross the board of all the studies. When I was reading them, it seemed straight across the board, country to country, and like I said, state to state. So I'm curious as to what your studies are like. What are you looking for? What are you studying? What do your outcomes look like? What sources are you pulling from?
Yes, first of all, I love the fact that we're having this discussion because and seeing both sides. So first of all, thank you for that. Secondly, the thing that was resonating in my mind as you were speaking was endocannabinoid deficiency. So, you know, that's one thing that I think is very behind in regard to research. And I just want to start there before I talk about what we do. So in my lab, again, cannabis is a scheduled substance. So there's very hard to conduct, randomized controlled trials. So as an epidemiologist, we know that there's certain, levels of study design, and there's almost a continuum of rigor within study design so that we can make conclusions. So I start there because at this stage within my laboratory, and also due to the regulations surrounding the plant and the medicinal research, capabilities, we have mostly observational studies. And right now I just launched a cohort study where we're going to follow individuals long-term. Actually, I was doing some screening calls. So, to answer your question, my lab is focused on collecting evidence from self-report, and we also supplement that by quantifying cannabis on urine, blood, stool, spit, hair. So a lot of the things we're focusing on is really, and I'm going to share here in the green room with you guys, my dream and passion and real belief is to try to characterize the brain, heart, and gut system access. We always hear about the brain, gut. The heart, I believe, especially when it comes to cannabis, is really key into that overall system. So we're trying to collect evidence in that way, and that's why we use biomarkers, because up until now, recently, I would say in the last 5 years, most, if not all, research was self-reported evidence. So when you're hearing about these reports of, especially I'm thinking of a lot of the adolescent, measures that the research that I'm looking at to inform what we're going to do, all of it is asking the adolescents, how many days have you consumed in the past 30 days? What, not even lately, route is finally included, which we know route directly impacts health impacts due to our system. So anyway, I'm going really left here, but I could speak for decades on my research, but the point is that we use a multi-systematic approach, collecting evidence from various pathways so that it's not just singular based. And regarding the psychosis comments and the possible negative impacts, we are seeing in our lab, just to be clear, the analyses are under review. So this is hot off the press. I was like, should I say hot off the press? Yeah, so it's under, I'll give a little piece. So as a piece, we just finished analyzing a pilot study of 50 healthy individuals who consume cannabis. And the point of the study was to test their cardiorespiratory fitness. And we had them on a treadmill doing, we always hear cannabis makes you be a couch potato. Let me tell you, I know a lot of triathletes that consume cannabis. The NFL is ready to fund research on cannabis and pain. So let's not digress there. So this data is showing that depending on the concentration of the cannabinoids, we measured CBD and THC and their metabolites, let's be clear, based on the concentration of that was directly correlated to mental health reports systems. So when we used the Beck anxiety inventory and also Beck depression inventory, and we saw that there was associations. I'm not going to say what kind yet. You have to read the article when it comes out. But it matters. It matters how you ask the questions and what data you're analyzing.
But for the data questions, because typically what I've seen with the research questions, even a lot of it is like, well, how did you feel after? Were you depressed? How did you feel? Were you happy? Like, I mean, these are such like, I don't know, to me, they just seem like such like, I don't know, like lame questions to ask in a research. They were like, so were you depressed after this? Did you feel better? Was your anxiety higher or lower? I mean, these are so subjective to the person in that day, in that moment of their life and how they're feeling when they're answering that, that was my question of like, why, how are you gathering your research? How are you I know it's all a lot of self-reporting. And with the self-reports you tend to get people who are like, oh, I love the product and it's fantastic. And then you get some people that are like, oh, it's whatever on a day. And so that's why I was asking how you quantify it, just because of what I've seen for like a lot of the questionnaires regarding cannabis use.
So some of your research was done in the HIV world, correct, Denise? And researching those patients. What did you find? Did you find more demonstrable positives or any negatives necessarily? And do you have fears that as now that we're in 2021 and we're not just talking about the plant necessarily, because I guess what bothers me about what's going on in Colorado is that I think we have to realize that in 2021, we're not just talking about a plant anymore, right? And as they talk about the restriction of a THC content in a plant, they're lumping it in with the preparation of a concentrate, so to speak. And, to me, they're kind of blurring the lines. And I guess the second, like I said, question would be, do you have concerns of concentrations of THC necessarily getting in the way based upon the questioning and what you've seen in the past with your research? Do you think it's really something that we need to keep our finger on that pulse about?
That's a fantastic question. First of all, we always need to keep our fingers on pulses of things, especially when it comes to health and cannabis and the impacts. Humans evolve, plants evolve. But as far as my concern with the THC, in a calculated response here for full disclosure, I think that the evidence that's provided is not matching the responses in policy per se at all times. So I just think that,
Listen, I don't
Yeah,
mean to
it's
put you
hard.
on the
It's
spot.
hard. It's
My
hard 'cause
point
she's in the
is,
middle of
I think
research,
we
and
need to
that's-
really be aware that it's
Really
the
a spicy question.
Oh, it's okay, Denise. Listen, it's the modern world of 2021, and that's why we need to have open discussion
I think this is awesome.
amongst
I love
clinicians, amongst
And the
researchers.
researchers,
Of
yeah,
course.
absolutely.
And that's why I knew that she would be such a great guest today,
Yeah,
to show the
wow.
deep dive that really this is all about.
And the passion.
And looking at the cardiorespiratory.
And yeah, I love the fact that she's going into the heart too.
And just getting back to the cannabis use disorder side of things, that's why I think we need a new definition of it, because there are too many high performance athletes, okay, but also high performers in everything. So for example, Denise, what if you're a aging surgeon into your 50s and you're developing a tremor, but you find that there's a 1-to-1 patch, for example, that you can put on in the morning that takes your tremor away, and you can still function as a surgeon? Obviously, that's a use of a THC, CBD. And once again, in the green room, we always focus on, and that's why I love the conversation today, because we're never all about just the THC. We're always about the entire endocannabinoid profile. We're not just about the inhalation techniques. We're all about all the techniques. And that's what makes cannabis medicine. That's the other side of what's dangerous, Denise. And I don't know if you clued into that about what's going on in Colorado. They're actually asking the doctors to prescribe cannabis, and they're making them get into a dosing type of regimen, of percentages, of timing. And everybody that's in the cannabis world knows that the education of a patient empowers them, okay, to take care of their health in a better way, which includes exercise, and includes diet, and includes all those other factors of wellness and health. So to me, I get crazy when the discussion goes too far awry on the THC side. But we do need to recognize in 2021 that there may be harms and dangers, which means that we need to continue to educate and advocate. So it's the discussion.
But I also think, like, along with like the research aspect of like the health and wellness portion, where you're talking about, NFL endorsements and things like that of cannabis for pain. But I think also on the education side for the cannabis physicians, what you just said just sparked something in me. Like, I think the education going forward from cannabis physicians needs to be a focus on the entire body of health of a person, and the physical aspect of go get exercise. And I think when the patients come in, the cannabis physicians need to address that too, and say, you know what, you want a healthier lifestyle, you're looking for something more holistic, you're looking for a natural alternative, but also focus on diet, focus on exercise, focus on the whole body, on the whole body. I think, and that's why when Denise mentioned, she's not just the gut, but the brain and the heart. I mean, she wants to focus on everything, and I think that's so critical. I really enjoyed that you said that. I'm like, it's great that you're incorporating everything. So going forward, like, so where is your research taking you? What are you looking at exactly? We can go more into that because we're talking too much amongst ourselves, I think.
No, I love
I want to hear from you.
Well, first, my research right now, I feel every day something new comes out where we're trying to do something new. But right now we are focused on getting this, the study off. We're going to have 400 18 to 30-year-olds within this cohort. And we're funded by the I didn't even mention that actually. This is pretty huge, especially when we're talking about cannabis.
Can
And
patients participate, Denise? Can
yes,
patients that are watching now get in? Tell them how.
so thank you, Dr. If you happen to be watching this and you're between the ages of 18 and 30, feel free to go over to herbalheartstudy.com and you can enroll in our study. Of course, we're gonna have screening questions and communicate with you, but we're funded by the National Institute of Health, and
Very
I want to
good.
pause there because cannabis research, we started this conversation talking about the scheduling, right? And the challenges scientists are having to provide the evidence that clinicians need to create these education programs, right? So the fact that now we're seeing National Institute of Health starting to fund more of this cannabis research is actually I think a good step in the right direction.
Congratulations on that. That's great.
Yeah, I actually wanted to share my screen really quickly. I just tested it and it works. So I want to point out, because the one question about that I really want to bring us back to that THC question. I know I fumbled it a little. I love football, but it was because of the political, especially as a scientist. So I just want to show this really quick to you. I'm going to make it bigger, so don't worry here.
Yeah, it's a good sign.
Oh, you can see, can you see it?
Yeah, we see it. Yep.
Okay, so this is literally my life in a picture. This is what we study in our lab, everything. And this is, this is why I consider it almost irresponsible to not incorporate THC in some cases when dealing with cannabis. So if you look here, your brain has CB1 and CB2. This is why that idea of psychosis and all of these potential negative mental health implications are possible. It's because our brain has receptors that directly bind with THC. So I just wanted to show a visual representation as to why it's important to not just study one cannabinoid or try to limit. There's so many cannabinoids, and they all impact our health based on all of these organs and our endocannabinoid system. So I just had to throw that out there.
Can I ask you a huge favor
Yeah.
at the end? Can you send us a copy of those slides so we can put them up on our website, as well as the tag for our patients if they want to get involved in your study, so we can put that all up on our Facebook page? We would love it if you can share it. It would be great. I love it.
Sounds good.
I just love your concept of your life in a picture. Your life in a slide. I can only imagine what mine would be, what yours would be. It would be a great project, I think, to a certain extent. But you're right, Denise, and that's why I think that we need to continue to be active and advocative about all of it, because we're just scratching the surface. And I know you're aware, of course, of Dr. Meshulam over in Israel. They're looking for cannabinoids that don't even yet exist. And I can't say that I'm a synthetic guy necessarily, because I'm all whole plant, entourage product, botany, but there probably are cannabinoids out there that will respond to the receptors in a way that we don't even know. The acidic cannabinoids, of course, need more exploration, because we feel that they're probably significantly more anti-inflammatory, anti-neoplastic and the whole bit. But yes, we're just scratching the surface. And, people have heard in the green room, I made the analogy before. I like to say it's kind of like the Nazca lines, where we that are involved, we can see everything from above in a perfect outline. But when you get down on the ground, the dust is only about a 1/4 inch thick. So there's so much more to explore. And for sure.
It sounds like, because the researchers have their hands tied behind their back. So once that opens, you're going to talk about flooding of studies coming out, right. I'm sure. And you're in the forefront. So, but I can't even imagine
and I know that you mentioned Michelle Weiner, and you and Michelle, I know, are collaborating on a few things down there. And so there's excitement, right now. But, once again, so appreciative of the work that you're doing, and we're going to follow it and with joy, because listen, that's what the politicians need to see, is that legitimacy. They do. They need presentations like this.
Sometimes when you watch those legislative sessions and who they bring in as panelists, you have to wonder.
And wouldn't you rather watch a Dr. Denise Vidot than a Dr. Bertha Madras, everybody? Dr. Bertha Madras would be the Betty Crocker of the prohibitionism movement. And here we have Dr. Vidot,
He's passionate about the plant and
It
the
is.
research.
And you have students, right, Denise?
Yeah.
You have students that you're training to do the same thing. Tell us about that. And
that's
actually what you're an instructor and a teacher too and all that too?
Yes. Oh my gosh. That's my favorite part of what I do, because
I can imagine. Yeah.
Next generation. Sorry. This question is so great to me, because literally the feelings of isolation that I felt as a student who had an idea, like, I don't know if you could see, like, if I could show you my heart, and really, if I didn't have I'm Puerto Rican, and we call it ganas, like the gumption. If I didn't have that, the ganas to keep going, all the words that I heard from my mentors and teachers really could have made me stop. So I have a lab actually that has students from all over the US actually, and some across shores in the UK. And so I train starting at high school all the way to assistant professor level. And
Awesome.
We are all ingrained. And that's really how we're a team. Nothing can be done in a silo. Nothing. Just like the plant. Nothing. We can't just use one cannabinoid. It's a whole beautiful ensemble.
Well, listen, last time I saw you, we were wearing masks. It was over in Miami at the Can Lab event, and we were actually supposed to do a panel, but it didn't. Yeah, it was a funny day. But I still look forward to doing that again and seeing you post-COVID, of course. And listen, just everybody to have the knowledge that there's the Dr. Vidots out there doing what they're doing, kind of behind the scenes, so to speak. But we don't want to keep you behind the scenes. We want to make sure that everybody knows about it. Because like I said, you need to be included in these discussions as we boots on the ground clinicians go forward.
Because it legitimizes everything. Because I think one of the things is we were talking earlier a little bit about, the misconceptions from professors onward of cannabis, calling it weed, calling it, pot. And I think with the research comes the legitimization. I can't even say that word. It legitimizes marijuana and cannabis as the plant, and we can talk all we want and say, this is what we see in our patients, but until the studies come out with the universities behind them and they come out with data, the average person wants to see what she's doing in the background, and then when she comes out and she says, this is what we found, then people are like, see, we saw this in the study and this is what we see. So I think, like, even for clinicians, I think we'll have our patients, but I think for the bulk of people in the country, the studies and what Dr. Vidot is doing is what's going to matter going forward.
Listen, Denise, we say there's a big rock out there, and we're chipping away with the hammer, and you're a big part of the hammer.
Part of the hammer. Huge.
I'm happy to be on the same vibration as you all. Honestly, working together is the way to go.
It is. You have, like you said, no one can work in a silo. I think it's the physicians, the patients, the researchers, everybody. What do you see going forward? Say, should by some grace of God at least get marijuana get descheduled? Not, maybe rescheduled, not descheduled. We wish for descheduling, but for rescheduling, where research dollars would open. What do you see like going forward with that as far as research goes in general? Kind of a tough loaded question.
Let me tell you, no, this is first of all, I'm very spiritual, and today's an eclipse. I'm very in tune with plants and energy. So it's a new moon, also a solar eclipse today.
Yeah,
and you're asking this question, I'm going to leverage this opportunity to manifest what I would like. And what I would like to what I believe is going to happen, and what I know is going on in my laboratory right now, we have at least 5 different R01 level grants already written. We have at least 5 different, along with those grants, written protocols of randomized controlled trials that we would like to conduct. Awesome. Most of them are in collaboration with clinician, my favorite one, Dr. Michelle Weiner. She and I are just like this, like holding on, waiting to be allowed to conduct the research that we have, so
hopefully it's in the stars today.
So we're putting it into the stars,
And Denise, we have a pool of patients, and we have a pool of patients here at Compassionate Cannabis Clinic. And I say all the time, I'm not a researcher. I never will be. But surely when somebody's ready to come in and survey and research and everything, we'll be absolutely willing, participants. We do encourage our patients to participate in the various state studies and things of that nature. So I'm so glad that you announced your earlier study, but for the 18 to 30-year-olds and everybody else. So everybody get involved. Let's make sure we make our voices heard and keep things going the right direction. But thank you so much for everything that you're doing down there.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me talk about it.
Yeah, we are actually. You know how the green room goes.
Oh yeah, I'm like, wow, we're out of time because it sounds like a wrap up.
No, listen, we'll probably got to go back to starting,
earlier.
We do.
I have so many questions for her, but we'll have you on again.
Oh, for sure. Which is no doubt about it. Denise, have a great day. Be well. Enjoy the solar eclipse.
Enjoy the solar eclipse because I know I'm going to. Yeah, that's one of my things too.
And we'll see you soon. Keep doing what you're doing.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Everybody have a great day. See you next week in the green room.
See you next week, everyone. Thank you.